I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts.
What you're about to hear isn't political theater. It's a direct warning about what happens when the rule of law is replaced by fear. In this exchange, Representative Julie Johnson confronts Kristi Noem with a simple but devastating truth.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there. even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
Julie Johnson directly confronts DHS Secretary Kristi Noem over what Johnson describes as systemic abuses by immigration enforcement agencies and a fundamental breakdown of the rule of law. Rather than framing the issue as a partisan or ideological disagreement, Johnson grounds her argument in constitutional principles, legal standards, and first-hand observations, arguing that current enforcement practices are actively violating due process and civil rights. Johnson begins by addressing what she sees as an escalating climate of fear across the country. She explains that this fear is not limited to undocumented immigrants, but extends to lawful residents, American citizens, and even law enforcement officers themselves. According to Johnson, this atmosphere is driven by rhetoric coming from the highest levels of government and filtering downward into enforcement behavior. She warns that such fear is dangerous because it erodes trust, destabilizes communities, and increases tension between the public and law enforcement. At the center of Johnson's critique is Secretary Noem's claim that DHS is restoring the rule of law. Johnson flatly rejects this assertion and explains that the rule of law rests on two core pillars, probable cause and due process. She argues that neither is being consistently respected. Johnson states that individuals are being detained or arrested based solely on appearance, particularly skin color, without any individualized suspicion or evidence of wrongdoing. She emphasizes that this practice is incompatible with constitutional standards and cannot be justified under any legitimate interpretation of lawful enforcement. Johnson further explains that due process, the right to a fair hearing and legal protections before being deprived of liberty, is being routinely denied. She describes cases in which individuals are detained for days without hearings, access to legal review, or meaningful opportunities to challenge their detention. According to Johnson, these practices represent a severe departure from constitutional norms and threaten the legal protections that apply to everyone in the country, not just immigrants. To support her claims, Johnson cites her visit to an ICE detention facility outside Dallas. There, she observed that more than 70% of detainees were classified at the lowest threat level and had no criminal history whatsoever. This directly contradicts repeated claims by the administration that enforcement efforts are narrowly focused on serious criminals or national security threats. Johnson argues that these findings expose a gap between official rhetoric and operational reality. The script also highlights the human consequences of these policies. Johnson recounts multiple incidents in which American citizens were detained by ICE despite clearly identifying themselves as U.S. citizens. Some were allegedly assaulted, suffering broken ribs, brain injuries, and other physical harm. In one case, an elderly man was reportedly knocked to the ground after asserting his citizenship, only to be detained anyway. Johnson stresses that such actions represent an alarming disregard for both civil rights and basic human dignity. While Johnson acknowledges that many ICE and Border Patrol agents perform their duties professionally and lawfully, she draws attention to the existence of bad actors who exceed their authority. She argues that leadership has failed to adequately discipline or rein in these individuals. According to Johnson, the lack of accountability sends a dangerous message that misconduct will be tolerated or ignored, further eroding public trust. A recurring theme throughout the script is oversight. Johnson emphasizes that congressional concerns have been raised repeatedly through hearings and formal letters, many of which have gone unanswered. She frames this lack of response as an institutional failure that allows abuses to persist unchecked. Johnson argues that oversight is not anti-law enforcement, Rather, it is essential to maintaining legitimacy, professionalism, and public confidence in policing institutions. The analysis portion of the script underscores why this moment matters beyond immigration policy. It explains that when probable cause and due process are treated as optional, enforcement shifts from lawful action to arbitrary power. Arrests become seizures, and security becomes intimidation. The script warns that constitutional erosion rarely happens all at once. Instead, it occurs gradually through normalized exceptions, unanswered complaints, and unchecked authority. Ultimately, the script presents Johnson's warning as universal. When legal protections are denied to some groups,